I'm not hearing like people talking, just hearing like a buzz.
Get it out of the river.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
works.
use the magnet and get it out.
Hopefully they found all.
I know, it's so weird, isn't it?
After this thing, I'm gonna get some magnets and try the Sudbury River. So there's a hobby called magnet fishing,
Oh, yeah,
and they found a ballistic
yeah, and Newton,
yesterday.
and one last week,
And they found some.
Yeah, two,
last
one last
Friday,
week and one
too.
one yesterday, yeah,
Saying-
and they think there's more.
I think someone dumped a bunch.
Sure.
Anyway,
They were dumped because the new bridge was built eons ago and so forth, and they're revolutionary or they're old, right?
really? So strange. All there.
The girl. The other one here can be set up.
Anybody else looking for a chair? We have a couple folded up here if we need to dismount.
Girl that took the chairs, she's from Maine.
We're all
Our family.
brothers. And Chuck.
Brothers and fathers, yeah.
That's so nice.
Thank you.
You're the brother.
Next we had father remote.
Same style.
Paul, could I have the first slide, please? On December 8th, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed in the United States and the Japanese Empire. Tensions around the globe had been high, and the nation had been worried that war with either Japan or Germany was all but an eventuality. They feared millions of young men and women would go to war. Despite hopes for peace, they were right and the world turned upside down. What no one imagined is the effect this war would have on a small town called Sudbury and surrounding towns, Maynard, Hudson, and Stowe, so many miles away from the conflict. It's unlikely that these town names are ever spoken past the distance of Boston. Yet a large swath of these towns were taken, and they were mostly private land, and they would become federal property. 3,100 acres would be circled by wire fence, and the public told to stay out. The reason? Right? To install all together that were explosive transported to the land had owners, mostly farmers, such as Otto Hayden, he's pictured right. Next slide, please. The Nelson family, who had 3 generations working a large dairy farm. They lived off the land. Next slide, please. And here, the Sarvella family are ice fishing, obviously in the wintertime for extra food. And the land was also noted as beautiful, making it a beautiful backdrop for family photos, such as Mrs. Olala here. There was a gentleman who stopped in, who lives right beyond the pond. So this is Mrs. Olala. She married one of the sons on the other side of the pond. Over 80 families were displaced. They would be told to leave and never return. Not only did they lose their land and everything they built, the fields they once wandered, and their beautiful surroundings, they lost their closeness to each other. Next, please. Two cousins, pictured here, inseparable as children, have lived side by side. These were Fred Ergatis on the left and Bill Wickie. Each spring they would collect wildflowers to give out at the Memorial Day Parade. The loss of land, the loss of these families is difficult to reconcile even with photos of the past. But to those who wrote a small book, it resonates over 80 years later. And by your presence here, we're judging that it resonates with you too. Welcome to the author series, The Ammo Dump, Taking of Heritage. Thank you for taking your time out of your evening to be here. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Todd Boothroyd. This is my brother Paul and my father Paul. You waved. So, and before we begin, we'd like to thank Sudbury Historical Society for hosting us, Ed Kreutz for setting this up, diligently working, and for Rachel, who's been also working on our multimedia this evening. And first things first, the question that we'd like to know is, do we have anyone here who lost family in a property called the
Property.
Oh, sorry. That didn't lose property in over in the what's called. Okay,
Actually, it's the wildlife refuge today.
all the wildlife refuge.
Right.
These two gentlemen are gonna keep me honest all throughout the program. So, okay, so the one question that we often get, and this is a common question, is while this book has been a effort, our family did not lose any property in the wildlife refuge, the Ammo Dump. But we did grow up on the other side of the Assabet River, well within earshot of the explosions, the bangs, and the ground tremors that many people had experienced. And we also got to enjoy a view every once in a while of paratroopers dropping into the Fort Devens Ammo Annex. So none of those activities came without notice, and it always piqued our interest as to what was happening in the scenes there.
How many in this room know what a dim out is?
How many people in this room know what a dim out is?
But my father always said every time what they would do is these were planned, but they would do a dim out and you had to shut all your lights off. Even your radio with your little radio bulb, you couldn't even have one on. I can remember knocking on the door and saying, shut that radio off.
So during World War II, they were concerned and they held drills because they were concerned of flyovers in particular of enemy aircraft scouting positions. And at nighttime, if they looked at the lights, they could see a high concentration of people. So Sudbury was quite known. And if you look back, your town meeting notes, you'll see during the war years, all of the reports that they gave on the dim outs. They were very often scheduled, and there were wardens who would walk around and report on their districts as to how successful they were. So with my father, and for a lot of people, and a lot of people here, I suspect one of our reasons for writing this book was history, just the pure history of it. And the other thing is about my family had personal connection to a lot of people who lost their land within what's now the wildlife refuge. So my father's been collecting stories over the years, and he's been the main driver for this book. For years, he's tracked and collected paper and photographs and stories, and he was very nicely handed a bit of paperwork even at the beginning of this meeting. Thank you for him. And the truth, when he started getting earnest, he brought over a dozen boxes of paperwork. I get the dozen boxes. Thing, let's get going. Next day he showed up. The next day he showed up. And that kept on going for months. So it's just amazing. I still have found out that I've seen everything. So it just, what I'm trying, is it's amazing the effort he's put in. Officially said that he's collecting information for 23 years, been collecting steer for a lot longer. Book would not have matured if not for him as being the main driver. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
So, next slide, please. So, about a month ago, I was contacted by Wendy Carberry Sedlacek. Her father is Arthur Carberry, the gentleman on the far left, and they used to live on Old Marlborough Road. He's 96 now and still talks of his early years within the Northwest District. I just threw out another name there, Northwest District, and this one for the Sudbury people would actually be more common than for the people, say, in Maynard. When Sudbury was settled, and it was really in the core of Wayland, and then they started moving out, they had sections of the town. The Northwest District was from that center area up into the Northwest. So you'll see a lot of the history books and a lot of the articles them talking about the Northwest District. And after 1871, when Maynard broke off in a part, that's when the names started separating out. But still, when we were writing the book, we didn't have a better name for that area, until we got to the ammo dump. And that's why I'll use the phrase Northwest District.
To be honest, what we wrote the book about was the people that lived there. This book is not about government did there, the trucks they dumped on their nose and people that jumped out of airplanes and stuff. And what else they did, which was pretty cool stuff. But we concentrated on this about the people. This is what they lost and never gained, and the hope that none of us ever have to go through.
Well, people in the back, in case you didn't hear that. So my father added in that the real main driver, focus of the book was the people, such as the people that you see here. It was not so much the history of what the government did, but we wanted to get the stories out of the families such as the Carberries. So, so continuing back with Arthur, one thing that Wendy, it was great talking with the next generation of these families. And one thing that Wendy wanted to know was that her father, Arthur, is still married and still deeply in love with his wife, right there in the middle, and her name is June.
Oh, no. That's not his wife.
That's
It's a sister.
That's his sister.
That's
Thank you
his sister.
Find out.
You sure about that?
Still in love with his wife.
Yeah.
Okay, because she confirmed to me. Okay, we're gonna have a family discussion later. So by the way, if you ever are interested in writing a history book and you would want to have a lot of deep conversations going back and forth and saying, are you sure? Write a history book like this with your
Yeah.
family, because this is all we've been doing for the past year. Okay, I definitely know the gentleman on the right. All right, and that's his younger brother, Charlie, who's been described as a precocious 93-year-old.
Charlie's in Texas.
And in Texas. And but this family is very close and caring.
And that's June,
And that's June.
but it's not his.
They look alike.
They're brothers and sisters.
You're telling me now.
It's in the book.
It's in the book. We need a new fact checker. Arthur, okay, let's move. So Arthur was a young boy when his parents bought a cottage on the north side of Willis Pond for the family. That was 1929. The Carberry family loved the area so much that they built a forever home close to Puffer. And until he was 50, Arthur lived at this location.
And this cottage was right on the list where Babe Ruth did his famous, shove the piano and, but he
So
was drunk all the time.
So the lore was that Babe Ruth at the same spot pushed the piano into the Willis Pond. We still want to go diving looking for the wires. So Arthur Cup wrote many years later. When I look back at the writings, I find references to many physical activities we enjoyed, such as swimming, ice skating, and but I reminisce about our surroundings. I realized there were other things that made it such a wonderful place. Think of the sounds we heard. The sounds of the wind softly whispering in the pines, thousands of frogs peeping in springtime, a sound that no human composer could ever hope to duplicate. The sound of ice cracking on the pond and breaking up in spring, the whippoorwills calling in the night and on a clear winter night, the sound of the train whistle and the mill clock striking the hour. The mill clock being the mill in Maynard Center, and it would just carry over the hill and all the way to the area. So we are very fortunate to have Arthur's poetic writings, and I'll take a note to a moment to note that these family stories are important, and we encourage everybody here to write down these family stories and pass them on to the Historical Society, pass them on to the next generation, because once we're gone, all those stories which are up here that we remember as part of our childhood, they're going to be lost forever. We were very fortunate. A lot of families did this, and from that, we were able to document, bring this into the book.
A lot of the families right now, we're still getting stories and books. I got 2 last week.
So that's our story. Arthur learned to speak from his father, who would come home or go out early before work and do. On the stories, we did get material last week from a gentleman called. His father is actually pictured in this photo because he was shortly conceived, very right after this. But his older brother on the far left is John Pack, and he went a bit further on writing day stories. He wrote almost like manuals, and we have about 11 of them. And the stories are just incredible about day-to-day activities, conversations they had. And there were, out of these 10, 11 volumes, one thing that he wrote was, my father and mother thought it would be best to get a farm to live on. They succeeded in buying the farm. We had some horses, cows, pigs, and chickens. I worked in the mill as a weaver, and mother tried to take care of the animals with us kids. We would sell milk, eggs, potatoes, corn, apples, meat when we butchered some of the animals. If we had any extra milk, mother would make yogurt, butter, cheese to sell. During the Depression, I don't know how we would have lived otherwise. We had plenty of good food, even though we didn't have any money. When many of our friends wanted to have a garden to grow some potatoes, instead of paying us for using the garden, they would help us in digging our potatoes, cutting our corn, doing hay. Mother usually heated the sauna. This was a Finnish family, and we would feed them. Many would come to work for a meal. Usually they would also be given little vegetables to take home. So this was during the 1930s, very late 20s, and it gives a fantastic glimpse of that life. John went on to write, one fellow came with his father to dig their potatoes, driving a Metz Roadster. Next slide. Thank you.
Wow.
This is not the actual Metz Roadster. This is one that I pulled down off the internet, but I figured it was good to show you.
But that's made in Waltham, Mass.
Made in Waltham, Mass. So, as they had, and by the way, this family came out of Waltham, Mass, because John went on to say, as they had most of the potatoes dug in grain sacks, he started to take them home to Waltham. He put 3 sacks in the Roadster of potatoes into his car and hoped it would go up the hill that he went over the river, but it didn't. So they got up, partially up the hill, and the car did not have enough power. So they had to come down to the bottom of the hill, They took off 2 sacks of potatoes, drove up to the hill, offloaded that 3rd sack, down the bottom of the hill, loaded up another sack, and they kept on repeating this. And they had to do this at every hill in between the ammo dump and Waltham. And you folks probably know there's a few hills. So this is, it's just a wonderful story of what people went through in their life to, in fact, support themselves and feed themselves. And when you think about it, this family came out of Waltham. At one point, they could afford a car, but during the Depression, they didn't have enough food for money at that point and work. So they needed to work and find other ways to put food on their table. So from a historical perspective, as I keep on expounding, these stories are filled with wonderful details not recorded anywhere else. They are pure gold. The family of the Packies lived off the land, and with each child helping tend in turn. Thank you, Paul. Hilda, pictured here, in that prior picture, she was the little girl on the left. She had lost her father. He died during the Spanish flu or from the complications of it. And so from when she was that little child, that was the last time she had seen her father. Her little brother, Ate, never actually met his father. He was conceived and the father passed away. They grew up without a father for several years until Mrs. Packy remarried. But in order to make things happen, this girl had to grow up tending to the farm and tending to the farm animals. And in particular, she was well noted for taking care of the cows. And this family had trained the cows, so they sent them off 2 acres into the back of their property in the morning. And then in the evening time, all they had to do was give out a sharp whistle, and the cows were trained to come running back in to be fed and into the barn and to be milked. So for Hilda, it wasn't always easy, but you know, these activities shaped her life, her childhood, so that when she became an adult, she really memorized all these scenes. Next slide, please. And among the other activities, also during the Depression, this is Hilda with her little brother Ate on the left-hand side. They always put on their thinking caps on to find ways of making money. Here, they went out in the wintertime. We know that they went along the Assabet River in particular, and they were cutting down small sticks and also grass, and they were constructing all that material on the right-hand side to make brooms. So come springtime, they would go into the various towns and they'd sell brooms, and that's how they would actually get some spending cash for the family. It occurred to me when I was reading John's writings that they were all about his childhood years. He didn't write about his adult years, really. And they were all about within the confines of the Northwest District, except for when they took forays out to, say, get their driver's license up in Lowell or out in Boston. And so his childhood really shaped his adulthood, or else he would probably not have focused his stories all that time. So that many years from when the events had happened. And John was not the only Packy to express those strong emotions for his childhood. His sister Hilda, there on the right, she didn't have any photos of her farm. So she painted one from memory, and that's the painting.
And that's the same farmhouse that they moved in the 1961 and to Boothroyd, over by the wayside inn.
So, yeah, so the farmhouse there, we were talking about with the gentleman, we were talking earlier about moving houses. So the one on the right, the farmhouse, that was moved to Boothroyd Road in Sudbury. It's among the few, 5, 7, how many survived?
5 or 6.
So 5 or 6 property. So out of all these families, and we said 80 plus all of the outbuildings and et cetera, only about 5 or 6 of the buildings that are in there have survived.
They're gone now. They're kaput now.
Right. So a lot of them raised, a lot of them just fell into decay. And so we lost that aspect of the history. And so when you think about it, we are very fortunate in the town of Sudbury to have Longfellow's Wayside Inn. But there was also Rice Tavern, which was on the intersection in Old Sudbury, on the intersection of Old Marlborough Road and the Concord Highway. And And we lost those buildings, even though they were separated by the families, because they were taken and then left to decay. So, so on the memories, in the book we wrote, once had heritage, the events of their lives, whether dramatic or mundane, these weave memories good, neutral, or bad, and the memories leave indelible marks. For families, these moments constitute later conversations that start with the words, remember when. Despite being intangible, this heritage is invaluable. There is an emotional attachment, a bond that ties us to a place, the family, and history as time passes. That is heritage. When we wrote those words, we wanted to convey why the story of the ammo dump was important, and it was about families. We were thinking about the individuals such as Arthur Carberry and his mother and his siblings. We were thinking about John and Hilda Packey, the cousins Fred O'Gatis and Bill Wickie, Everett and Alma Sarvella and their children. We were also thinking about many of the other families when we count about 80 plus. A few of those names are Anderson, Costanzo, Honkala, Wickery, Hunt, Hayden, Gately, Laurel, Lent, McDonald, Mason, Matson, Nelson, Olala, Hannanen, Sippo, Taylor, Bose, Montallo, Waugh, Williams, and others, including one family from Maynard, the Hill family.
And that doesn't even count all the woodlots. Red Acre Farm had a pasture in there, summer pasture. They had all of these things that were not even taken into consideration. I didn't touch the south side of the annex where Raytheon had during the time they had their facility in there. They takes to Watertown to be redone over, ship them out here, and they ran fit tests on them before they were released back to the government. I mean, there was so many things going on in there that the book could be like this, and then some.
So, but one of the reasons why I went through that long list of names, and as my father says, we omitted many because we couldn't produce a book this big that people would stay awake for. But it's important to name them because it gives life to these people, that they were real people, and their lives were turned upside down. So, one moment, please. Come right back to you. So, however, now that the book has been out, let me add. December 1941, when the war broke out thousands of miles away, these people never imagined that their lives in these small towns, just quite literally no more than 2 miles away from where we are now, would be turned upside down a few months later. However, now that this book has been out and we continue to speak with individuals such as Wendy Sedlacek, we've come to realize that the heritage passed down through generations, and it continues to affect people. We've also received word from a new generation area who have no original connection to the families of the Northwest District. I've had people walking through the wildlife sanction talk to me about it, saying, I never knew, but now I do, and I'm really fascinated about it. One person wrote, her name is Renee, I'll leave her last name off. I hike the National River Wildlife Refuge all the time, and now I'm obsessed with tracing all the properties featured in the book. This time of year, you can see some of the ruins too. It's fascinating and heartbreaking. And right before the meeting, we were talking about seeing the chimney for the Carberry farm, just on the north side of the property. Whether we call it the Northwest District, the ammo dump, or the Assabet River National Wildlife Refuge, this area continues to affect people. In a manner, a new thread of heritage is being woven and entwined with the old. The authors before you certainly wanted to keep the history remembered. And we want to say that we're thankful that you showed up and to listen to this, because it's a grateful new twist, and we thank you for your support for the ammo dump by taking a heritage. Thank you. Thank you. If I could, I should her first.
Oh,
So I'll get back to you.
I was quiet, but I did have a question.
Please.
I might be the only person who doesn't know. How many acres
Are we talking? for that?
3,100 acres, roughly 4 square miles,
Originally,
originally.
it is less
It's
than that.
changed over the years.
So where exactly is it? It's along the Aspet River?
Yes, so the Aspet River is the northern edge. And then if you come down to, God, I'm gonna be pressed, Hudson, the north side of Hudson Road.
Your White Pond is
White Pond, the firefighters academy.
Fire Academy.
That's the far corner of it. And then as you turn up and
And,
slopes around there.
and we didn't even talk about that section.
And then if you go north on Route 27 here, so you come down to Route 27 and go up, just as you are getting to the Maynard and the sports field on the market basket,
Basket's on, just on the outside of it.
right on the other side.
Yeah, but
So-
then, but it abutted right up to where Market Basket is.
Wow.
So one of the things that we put in the book was how much of a disruption this was, because you used to be able to drive through this area, going along the White Road and up through another road, cut very quickly from, say, Hudson into Maynard. And then they put up this big fence and saying you can't get there. So now, if you think about it, you have to drive all the way around. We do have a map, by the way. Here, I'll hold it up for everybody. And we'll put this up. We didn't have our break list, but we'll put it out after the meeting out in the other room. And hey, Paul, can you get on the other side? So we do have a little map with all the family names and et cetera, and it was all in a cheat sheet that we went to. This was actually produced by the Army for when they were doing the eminent domain.
So they didn't pay anybody for any of this?
They did.
Yeah.
They did, and I promise I've not forgotten you back there. Thank you, Paul. So the good news, the bad news is eminent domain, the property was taken away. They had about 30 days notice. So the true story in it is on March 25th, the government went to court and the judge said, yeah, I'm signing off on the eminent domain. The public needs this more than the private landowners. The bad news is, the other good news is, due to the Fifth Amendment, if the government takes something by eminent domain, they have to pay fair value. The bad news is on that is, what is fair value? And that is kind of what they say market prices by shopping around. This was at the tail end of the Great Depression. So some properties were still seen as being depressed. And then some properties were evaluated higher, such as the young boys there. One of their homes actually, they were given $8,000. They were on less than an acre of land. The house was built within the past 2 years. Right down the road, the Sarvella family was on 100 acres. They had a big old farmhouse which dated back all the way to the late 1600s. Beautiful home.
All the way back to the Puffers.
So the Puffers had settled there, and the Puffers were out of Maynard. The Puffers were out of Sudbury, and they were among the family that settled among the first in Sudbury.
1643.
And they only got $6,000. 2 years prior, the Sarvellas had taken out a loan for $3,000 to replace the windows in the house.
Oh, no.
So it gets worse. So for a lot of this, so the timeline was, they got the notice on March 25th, be out within, say, 30 days. It was kind of a rolling thing.
Some were 10.
So the Sarvellas were among the last ones. They really pushed it until the end, until they finally got a letter saying that you have to be out in 5 days. And they were out at the end of May. And at that point, the bulldozers were already in, mowing things down. We were looking at all the paperwork, and the deeds were signed over to the government, usually between September and November. So if you look at all the deeds, that's when all the paperwork was signed, where they transferred the property.
It had to do with money.
And with money, the Lent family didn't get their payment until the following May. So these people lost their property, and at least in the case of the Lents, they didn't get paid for the property they had lost until a full year later. So they had to derive income from another source.
Most of the people stayed in the town they had lived in. If they were living in Sudbury, like the Hills, they went over to I forget the road that they moved over to. Yes, yep. And some came into Maine and lived there, but they always had family or some other way to go to, or had other rental, and so forth.
All right, 1 second, please. Thank you for being very patient.
That's fine, and I think he's answering my question. My question was, how many of the families were able to successfully relocate within the 4 towns?
We don't have, we never counted the number. The question was, how many families were able to successfully relocate into the area towns? We don't have an exact number on this. We actually never tried to trace it down from that aspect, but we're gonna say most of them. A lot of them stayed local. When it came, they also needed to pick up and find work, and they needed to kind of go where they had that work that was familiar to them. For a lot of the people who had already been in Maynard, they went back to work in the mill. As unhealthy as it was, because a lot of them were weavers, it was easy to get work, and it was very lucrative. So a lot of them did that. Plus, they also leaned on a lot of cousins. A lot of these families were not tiny families. A lot of them had cousins, siblings who lived in the local area. A lot of them were immigrants who had moved over at the same time, so they were able to lean on their families, which was the good news about it. But we did see some of these families where the kids were in high school and they dropped out of school and they had to go and work to support their family because they simply had to, and they couldn't go to school. So there was this gentleman here, please.
So it sounds like there was no effort on the government's part after buying the land
Right.
to relocate or compensate with other work, anything of that nature?
Well,
No,
yes and no. Ed Gately, his family owned the Gately farm, and they sold to Henry Ford in 1928. By the time the war came, he worked in there when they didn't have any fencing up yet. They were building bunkers.
explain later.
And yeah, no, you've lost my thought.
Yeah, he worked in a facility.
He worked in the facility on the same farm that his family originally owned.
But
God, he been doing keep it out of there.
The other one was it was Sarvella, because he wanted to keep an eye on what was happening in there. He went back to the government and said, "Oh, you're looking for a guard to keep people out? Okay, I'll work for you." So it wasn't like the government compensated for the land, and that was all of their commitment. But a lot of these people could still find some work, and sometimes it was within the ammo dump afterwards. And for various reasons, including they had to get a local fire brigade going, and they made that out of local people.
You have to figure one thing. When the government came in and took these by eminent domain, the facility was shut down in 1946. So that was 4 years, technically.
Yeah. So please.
Yeah, after it was shut down, was there any ammunition left that had to be cleaned up?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
There was ammunition left in there up through the 50s.
Wow.
And then that's that part of the facility, that's what it was there for. They had small arms, explosions. They had to take care of the bigger artillery and so forth. So it was up and through the 50s.
And then they hired a government contractor to come in and detonate all of the explosives that were left over. But that was the leftover from World War II. And then in the subsequent years, which is something that we really glossed over in the book, they brought in other types of ammunitions and explosives and chemicals, et cetera, to conduct tests.
Did the mill, this is a sort of a related question, did the mill pretty much convert to producing clothing for the war effort, the soldiers?
So I know we were doing, the question was, Did the mill convert from blankets to
Wartime.
uniforms or during World War?
during wartime.
Oh,
Yeah, during wartime.
they did
During
convert
wartime,
it.
But other than that, there was a brand of material they made at different types and so forth.
So, and my grandmother always told me that she knew what uniforms they were producing at the time by the color of the river.
That was the dye. And I saw the same thing when I was walking to school down
Was that
Walnut
ever
Street.
cleaned up, the river?
Yes, the river's
Yeah.
been cleaned up over the years.
Oh, yeah.
So, please.
It's a little hard in today's times to picture that most of these families went with a fair level of cooperation. But
Yes.
that's depicted in the book many times, and a lot of these people went and joined the armed forces.
Yep.
Can you speak to that? Was that?
Yeah, most certainly. So at the back end of chapter 4, as one of the things is, as we were researching this and we were reading articles and then reading all the first-hand accounts, you would see that so-and-so would appear as a bridesmaid in somebody else's wedding. And so as you're talking about this, there was cooperative. So a lot of these photos you saw in the beginning with the hide-ins, there were people helping out people. And it was very much the neighbor would say, hey, can you help me next week with this? Okay, and you help me later on. And then the kids would grow up together, they would walk to town together. So this was its own small knit community all over these years.
Plus 80% were Finnish.
Yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
particularly,
Oh,
so
yeah, I could hear that.
we did touch upon this in the book. So Finland was very at the end of the 1800s, and they were also oppressed by the Russians. So it made it very easy for corporations as well as government to send agents over to Finland and say, hey, come on over, we got work for you. And it was interesting because I was reading a lot of the shipping manifests for people as it was going back and forth. And I'd see the same name going back and forth. And it finally dawned on me, that was the agent. The agent would go over, would be bilingual, would talk to the people, recruit them, and walk them right into the country and set them up with work. And these people went to certain communities which were really built up with others of their heritage.
Let's answer the question. Yes, the people in there were somewhat cooperative with the government as far as moving out. It wasn't 100%, but it was a very different time
Yeah.
than it is now.
Yeah, they wanted to unify and win.
And, go ahead, Deb.
There was another book that I did about 10 years ago, I said now, The Assabet Mill. It's the story of the mill in Pitt. And it's available, it's available, and it's also in the library, you can take it out. But it really ties in with this, because the people, they used to walk, like Matson, probably she walked 5 miles each way to go to work. Then she went home, milked the cows or cut hay or whatever they were doing.
Going back to your question too about, so one of the more interesting people that we found that served in the forces was Miriam Sarvella. But to sum up on the cooperation level is a quote by Lenny Olala, who was an incredible athlete. So he said, when I look back, many people lost sons and daughters. We just lost a farm. I can accept that.
Yes,
And Lenny served.
yeah.
And he served in the service. The half those families, all the sons and daughters and mothers served after losing the farm.
I'm pleased. He beat you by a second, George.
You got a chance. Why Sudbury? Why did they put the ammo dump there? And what kind of links did they have? They had rail or truck? They had to get the ammunition.
Rail.
There you go. That's one of the reasons. We had the Central Mass line, which was running
Mass Central.
Mass Central, thank you. So, which ran almost due west out of Boston. Had to do a little bit of a changeover. that was one of the reasons why they wanted to transport this. This line was also retired from passenger rail some prior 2 years, so they would not be sharing the tracks with passengers when moving explosives. So there was a safety concern about that, so they pretty much had it all to themselves. There was never any actual written evidence as to why they chose this spot, but the rail was one of them. And then you can also factor in a couple other things. One is they didn't want to have explosives near the coast or near where Boston Port was, which was the south of Boston, because if the ammunition touched off, it would cause a lot of damage, one to the facility, but also in South Boston where there was a lot of population. So you wanted to get the ammunition storage into a place where it could be safely done, and if it did touch off, there was less damage of harm happening. They also wanted to get it away from the coast because there was legitimate concern about the enemy getting to it, and whether it was by sabotage, aircraft, submarines, and anything like that. So they wanted to move it in. And if you look at some of the technical specs for the German dreadnoughts of the day and age, they could shoot 27 miles. This ammunition dump was 30 miles inland. So they kind of put it right out.
Plus the water.
Plus the water table. So one of the reasons why Sudbury was settled in the first place was it was absolutely fantastic meadowland, which meant a very high water table. That extended up into the middle and southern part of the Northwest District. So there was plenty of water there, and the thinking was that with these igloos, that if one touched off, that cushioning of the soil would prevent the impact from traveling through shelf and doing a lot of damage that way, or to the other igloos in the area.
In considering the rail trail, almost all the trails in the asphalt railway, or the trees were.
A lot of them are, yes. A lot of the modern paths or roads were there from what the military had done as part of their, albeit you do have a couple of the trails follow the old Marlborough Road, the Upper Road to a certain degree, and White Road. White's is completely
White Pond Road, but it was also had other names.
Yeah, but White Pond Road is identical to how it used to be. And if you walk it, what I really amazed about when you walk that is it's also called Boone's Plain from the olden days, and it is plain, it is flat. You do not have a change in elevation at all. George?
Yeah, I'm sure all these families had family plots, cemeteries,
Yes.
their lands.
No.
What happened to those?
No. The only, what was by the Voss's Tavern, there's two smallpox, smallpox graves. Supposedly there is an infant from one of the farms. Other than that, other than the Native American stuff, which we can't talk about, no.
These were religious people, they'd want to be in the.
But they're in Maine, like half of them that died afterwards and so forth, and before, they're buried right in Maine. Some are in, just up the street here.
So, and then if you go to the cemetery and stuff, that was.
Easier for the government.
Yeah. Well, and that,
Couple.
See your arm.
No, I was trying to give you a break and let everyone else have a chance here. I was very curious because I don't know very much at all about this area of Massachusetts. And I understand there's Fort Devens and then there's a Fort Devens extension. Were the people who were stationed at Fort Devens, were they maneuvers in this location or was that entirely separate?
Yes.
they were in this, they were there. One of them actually, Sergeant, he jumped out of the plane and didn't open.
So we're going to be talking up at the Fort Devens Museum in short term. So that's a fantastic museum to visit. So Fort Devens was originally Camp Devens,
My father was there in World War One.
My father was there for World War II, so that's
Right.
very curious.
So Fort Devens was really the intake into the Army, plus it was also a transfer point. And that's where a lot of people went to be tested, medically examined, and also get their uniforms. And so after World War is one of the uses of Fort Devens. And they came down and they were doing training, explosives, maneuvers when they're in there. The gentleman over here has a nice photo of a ladder which goes up a concrete structure with a pulley on top. So they'd do told to run an obstacle course, jump up there, swing down there, keep on running.
So
Yeah.
during World War II,
For other some. So
I was there when I was in the Guards, and that was in the 60s. But I would do training, a lot of training.
but during it had a full line, one perimeter, and then there was them. Passed through a secondary gate to get in. So this was very much a controlled access, and it was a classified facility, was for explosives. So unless you had a purpose to be there, that was the only.
And nobody went over the fence.
Okay. All right. Who? We're young. Not supposed to. Okay. We got one person to admit. For us, we grew
So did the Boothroyd family close to?
very close.
We,
But then again, Maynard's so small that everything's.
we're about a mile away from the gate.
So the plan to deal with the treasure trove of original documents, you folks kept. So
So
what are you gonna do with these boxes?
go ahead.
Probably go to the Maine Historical Society.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere. We've been talking. What I would like to do is all of and stories and so forth they gave us. So much make a book, but combine it so that we have it, so that if a library needs it for something like that,
Research.
it would be good.
So you guys aren't gonna wanna do the second edition. The historical research is fascinating because it leads to more and more information as stuff comes out of the woodwork, so to speak, and comes out of people's attics and people's basements and people's recollection. One of the things that just drives me crazy is that when a house is cleared out, a lot of people think that the ephemera, what we call ephemera, goes into the dumpster instead of being preserved.
I was in real estate.
Collecting and keeping.
Go to his house and they go to my house. There's 3 more books there.
So to answer your questions, we knew that when we published this, we were still last minute contact, talking with people. And even since we published this and it got out there, stirred the pot even more, and we've been getting more information. So we'll probably have a second edition of this, but and a lot of the rest will go to the Historical Society. But we probably won't have a different book. What we've been talking a couple times.
so there was an area off of, I think it's Hudson Road. On the
Yes.
way,
Yeah.
that used to be curtained off, and there's now a wildlife.
Yes.
That's
this.
the ammo dump.
That's
That-
the
that's-
dump.
And you can walk in there now, and you can see the igloos are all there. So you can go in and you can see these igloos.
There's 35 in Maine alone. There's 50.
They
And
never took any of them down.
No,
and
they're too
no,
big.
no, they're there for the
You
duration.
can probably get up to about 20 of them.
Easily.
Some of them are out in the areas that they try to block. the
Well,
entrance.
they are us. We tacked the welded every door shut, but
There's still a couple open ones.
oh, there's
Yeah.
more than a couple. Kids do it.
Those kids.
When we s- houses in there, we would plywood the windows and the doors, and of course we used a drill, wireless. The kids brought their own in,
So,
so.
Okay, so did the government assess any of this land? Did anybody get their land back?
No,
so, no, none of the individual former property owners got it, except for the town of Maynard, a couple of the towns, got their properties. So there's a system, the GAF, General Administration. Thank you. I love it. People keep me honest, because every time I get a new piece of information, something's got to go. So the GSA, they would have gotten a notification from the Army saying that we're divesting of this. And this was during the Bill Clinton presidency where they closed a lot of the bases. This was seen as surplus. So there's a pecking order where they go to other government agencies and say, who wants it? The Fish and Wildlife Service chomped at the bit to get it, and they took it. If they had not taken it, then it would have gone to the state level, and then if the state would have gone down to the town level, and then down to private ownership to come back. It didn't get that far. Furthermore, for the poor families who lost their property, they would not even recognize their land if they had gone back in, apart from the occasional chimney or one or two of the houses.
Pool.
I'm sorry?
Swimming pool.
Swimming, yeah. It was, I mean, a lot of it was either decayed or scraped clean. There was a hand.
Yeah.
It was you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just curious if they did a really good job of cleaning the facility, this site, but we've got some stories the last 2 days of the magnet hunters finding live ordnance in the Charles River. So has anything been shown up and found by hikers and others who have to fall in?
I have not heard.
Nothing that we've heard.
Nothing that we've heard of.
The National Wildlife did a complete survey of the land.
It was not only the Friends, but it was also the Wildlife Service itself.
One thing was found.
Okay.
It was not live ordnance. It was a large pile, very, very deep, of irradiated Swanson TV dams. Which, because Natick Lab was also given access to the property.
Yeah.
They were experimenting with preserving Swanson
Yeah,
TV.
you know, we really don't want to go down the Natick Labs thing because it just sours my stomach. There was a hand back there?
Yes, sir, it was a Superfund site in the late 80s, early 90s. It was cleaned up.
There was at least 3 Superfund sites, if I remember correctly, and they're still monitoring.
One of the biggest one was Raytheon, because the kids, there was stuff left behind, and kids being kids got in and shooting at it. And what are they, CBCs or something like that.
So they were storing chemicals in the bunkers themselves.
And
Of course, when
that
the
put it
bunkers
on the
broke
list.
into, canisters were broken open. But that doesn't even, there's even the fire pit where they burned everything that you could think of to try and, for one, they were testing uniforms to see what would melt, burn, etc. for the troops. But then they also opened it up for the fire departments to go in there and just train. And then the burning drugs, lighting off extra firecrackers.
Still doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there was a lot of various chemicals all over the place.
They had a bionic pig. And I know where it's buried too.
So, please.
Dad, please continue with this, because I've heard this, I just think.
Okay, they want the bionic pig story.
Yeah, why really want to hear this, please?
Bionic pig. They didn't know what to do with it after they were experimenting. So
What is it?
a pig.
So did they give
It
it
was a pig that
prosthetics, legs?
Experimental?
Oh yeah.
They did what to?
So the armed forces has a history of, they need to train or test things out, and they don't want to do it on a human subject. So they've done it on pigs. And including in this case, they were doing operations on pigs and they had a bionic pig.
And they
Just picture
didn't,
the bionic man of the early 80s. I know I'm dating myself.
so they buried it.
Any other questions on the families?
Well, when Melinda and I bought our first house on Hudson Road in Sudbury in 1978, and we're sitting there having dinner the first night, and everything's going fine, all of a sudden the house starts to shake
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
this, and we're sitting there, so what the hell is going on? The deuce and a halves are
Yeah.
heading up and down Hudson Road all weekend long.
we have that whole story, but we chose not to put it in the book because that wasn't what we were after.
Yeah. So you missed the tank drops, huh?
We missed the tanks.
I would have wanted to see that actually. Yeah, please.
Just unrelated, any idea how well you've done with book sales? Have you done
So we are somewhere, we've sold somewhere in the neighborhood, not an exact number of 1,000 copies. So it was, the funny story was, at least, so the title itself, well done. Where we grew up in Maynard, we didn't call it the ordinance, whatever the name was, or the Fort Evans Annex. We just called it the Emerald Dump because it was a new owner per week. And so we just called it the Emerald Dump, and that's how we grew up knowing it. So when you said the Emerald Dump, that's what you knew. If you had said Northwest District or something else, we wouldn't know what it meant. A taking of heritage is really the line because the story is really about balance. The Emerald Dump is the location, but the taking of heritage is the taking, which is a phrase they use legally in eminent domain. We are going to take this property, and it was a taking of the family's heritage. So in Maynard, there was a huge pent-up demand for this story because for years, you and I, who jumped the fence, were always told you can't go in there. And we always wanted to know what's going on in there, what's the history of that. So when the book came out in Maynard, the funny part is we didn't sell it, we don't have a bookstore in Maynard. We put it in a convenience store, and we were getting calls every third day saying, can you bring us another 50 books? Because people were picking them up 4 or 5 at a time because they're saying, I gotta send this to aunt or whatever. So, and particularly in Maynard, we did really well. But our family, we weren't looking to make this to make a profit or anything like that. We really wanted to do it to get the story of these families out there, particularly for the younger generation. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from those families saying thank you. And they're going, what's it all about? And people will quickly forget without this type of history that happened.
Did one thing, just walking in there, hit him, species, flowers, and bushes and trees and stuff. Like, because I went in and dug about 50 open wells. It's at least, yes, deep.
Theoretically, Fish and Wildlife Service has gone through, and also the Friends have gone through, and anytime they found a hole or a well, a lot of these were hand dug and hidden in the woods and covered. Theoretically, they have found all of them, but be careful, especially if you happen to go off path, and by the way, also watch out. And, but do so with caution, because that area has 400 years of history of human
at least.
machinations, and that's not even counting the Native Americans. And so we don't want you falling in a hole.
Yeah.
So please.
So you apparently have a run battle in the family between Igloo and Bunker.
Oh yes, we picked up. So for me, the person who was tasked with doing some of the wordsmithing on this, I needed to convey that a term that a lot of people understand, which is kind of bunker. Because if you say igloo, it won't, a lot of people say that. But the formal name that the Army used was igloo. And so I'll switch in between those two. And I got corrected about 20 times at a talk this past Saturday by somebody who I won't name. And so when he tonight said bunker, so we're a tight-knit family, like any family. We have to vent where we can, but it's been a true enjoyment doing it with my family. We've actually had some incredible conversations,
So
and we continue.
were you self-published? Yes.
Just so you know, your dad always-
Oh,
Not me. I didn't use.
okay. So the word, okay, he heard it, but okay. Anyway. So please, you're.
Were you self-published?
We were self-published.
Did you use the publisher in Maynard?
No, so we self-published through Amazon.
Okay. Oh.
And one of the reasons why was it was kind of a haste situation. And there's a couple fantastic companies that do publishing of these type of historical books. You've seen them in CVS, etc. It was just that they had format constraints, and it really didn't fit, particularly our chapter 4 with all the families and the type of information and how we wanted to package it. So we went on the self-publishing route on that.
One of the things to be careful about, if you search for it online, you'll find that there's some websites out there to allow you to download it. Be very careful, because we didn't authorize any of that, but on top of that, I took a look at them, and at least some of them are just trying to get your information.
Yeah,
They don't actually allow you to download it.
Yeah, they're trying to get you to sign up on things. So online, I love small businesses, by the way. I have to couch this. So if I could have gone with a small publisher, I would have gone with a small publisher. But we did go with Amazon, and Amazon is our only online presence that we have. I was talking with Ed earlier. He was asking about carrying the book here, and we said, yeah.
I do have the name of the publisher.
Okay, and we can always transfer to. We can always take it off Amazon, whatever. So Amazon did make it easy for us, and they've been just fine. They don't know who we are, obviously, but so yeah, we are self-published. Any other questions? You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much. We are happy to sign books for you. We also want to put out this map, and just thank you very much for coming out. You've been a delight.
Did it.